Okay, so it says we're live. Let's just check. Okay, all right. We are live. We are live on YouTube. I've been trying this out lately simply because, of what we were talking about backstage, just the feel of the energy. So I'm really, really excited, everyone. Thank you for joining us on today's first episode of the life. No, sorry, I'm getting it wrong. A Life of Greatness. And this actually came to me, I could say spontaneously, but I think it's been a build up because I have been searching within myself for the right frame for what I am feeling around, this collective up leveling, but also about the conscious need to step into what it feels like and what it is to live a life of greatness. And I am so excited about our first guest today, Mary Beth Hyland. Say hi.
Hello. I am so honored to be a part of this with you. And it is just a gift to be vibing out together here and with your beautiful community.
Awesome, awesome. I am really looking forward to today's conversation with you. There is quite a bit to unpack. I mean, your journey to me feels very, very deep, very rewarding. And my voice is going a bit squeaky right now, but that's okay. I'm sure our viewers will forgive me. I want to first introduce you before we, do anything else. So, who is our guest? Mary Beth. Mary Beth is a best-selling author and consultant on how to create a thriving workplace culture. I love those words. I love the language. She successfully led culture change efforts across nearly every industry. She's a published thought leader in the Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, and New York Times, to name just a few. You can catch her interviews on how to reduce stress at work on ABC, CBS, and NBC. And when she's not supporting her clients, she can be found on horseback in the mountains of Idaho. Did I say that right?
You
Wrangling cattle,
did.
quest to become a cowgirl. Those are seeming polarities, and we're going to unpack that. So, welcome and thank you so much for honoring the energy of a life of greatness because I think, we all have it in us. It's like a seed, but to be able to work with it with courage, with vulnerability, takes a lot. And I'd love to know, how did you get into your work? Because first off, and while we have kind of a format and things like that, I know, and I'm speaking to you, Mary Beth, as I say that just being fluid and flow with how this conversation goes is really where my own intuitive heart would like to be. And I want to know your story. I mean, what has led you into this space? How did you get here? We all know the kind of contrasting feel of what we're talking about, the pain points and struggles that corporate, whether it's corporate America, corporate Dubai, corporate India, wherever it is, there is, an understanding of what corporate means. Yet you seem to be bringing a vibe, an energy, and a value that is refreshingly required, important, and urgent. Dare I say, urgent. So tell us about your story. How did all of this happen to you, for you, through you?
Yeah, I love that. I could just listen to you talk the whole time, honestly, Caroline. It's so beautiful how you put things. So, This is definitely not the kind of thing where I was a kid and I was like, I'm going to do workplace culture when I grow up. Nothing like that. This is so far from any of what I thought I was going to be and who I was supposed to be, right? And what I was expected to be. And so my journey really started with doing all the things that people wanted me to do and being all the things people wanted me to be. So I was a very quote unquote successful person in my last job where I was a fundraiser for a global nonprofit organization. And I was doing record breaking philanthropy, meaning brought in more money they had ever seen. The program that I had developed for young professionals was deemed the best practice for the entire globe. So I was coaching and consulting with other nonprofit leaders all over the world on how to engage young professionals in the work. And I was winning every award you can imagine. It was kind of one of these things that was like, oh my gosh, I think in the year I left, I got like 10 awards, one being Innovator of the Year for my state. So it was like all of the things that people would say, wow, look at her. She's really doing it. Look at how successful she is. What an awesome job. She's so great. And that was not what was happening inside of me. You know, inside of me, I was having a full breakdown. I was feeling like I could never do enough. I had so much that I needed to accomplish, and I had to produce in order to maintain my status as a superstar. I needed to basically be on around the clock in order to satiate my racing thoughts of unworthiness. And so that ultimately led me to a moment in my relationship with my husband where one day he rolled
I
over
want
and
to stop you over there
yeah.
because you're dropping so many gems right now, which which at the level of consciousness that you are at, it may be a zoom through because you're telling a story for anyone watching in, but I know and you know that there are several people who will probably not quite catch the depth of what you just said. And yes, we will go down the rabbit hole on what you want to continue with. But the belief of not enoughness, I am not worthy, I am not enough, keep doing, be more, do more, maybe do more versus be more. Um, how did you get to that point of a realization? Because we're both in the field of coaching, we work with several kinds of audiences, and many people run away from what you're even talking about, right?
Yeah.
There's this whole busyness in business, of not enough time to just sit and even realize the kind of belief that you just spoke about.
Oh
How
yeah.
did you do that? I am not enough.
How did I realize that? Is that what you were asking?
Yeah,
Well, I didn't realize that. That was why I was in that downward spiral for so long. I was like stuck and I was in this loop that was like always going down, right? When I get an
yeah,
award, it would feel like I was going up, but then very quickly it would go back down, right? Because it was this false sense of happiness, this false sense of recognition of who I was supposed to be. And actually the when I realized I had a problem, when I realized that this was not healthy, it wasn't because I had an epiphany of like, oh, I need to do something different. It was because of what it's like the perfect pause that you just took, because I was just about to share that my husband one morning woke up, and he worked in finance at the time. So he was up at like between 4 and 5 a.m. and he rolled over into bed and he said, "It's so nice to see you." And I was like, what are you talking about? You see me all the time. Like, I got very angry
wow,
about it. Like, I didn't understand, right? I was triggered. We know this is what happens. Triggers bring to the surface what we need to heal.
yeah.
And so he just explained to me that, well, maybe I see him, but
Mhm.
I'm not ever in bed when he wakes up. I'm either already gone to work or I've fallen asleep on the couch with my laptop on my chest because I was
Yeah,
working all night.
yeah,
And so he was being kind and compassionate and loving, not in a nagging way. And it was because of the tone that he invited me into that self-awareness that I said, I have a problem and I don't know what to do. I had no idea. My only coping technique for the 3 a.m. racing thoughts was to get up out of bed and start working, because that was the only way I could calm them down. So it
Wow.
felt like I was doing something about it by just feeding it, feeding it, feeding it. And so it was my husband saying that led me to go to therapy. I started to go to mindfulness based psychodynamic therapy. And it was in my second session that she clinically diagnosed me with a work addiction. And I didn't even know that was a diagnosis. I didn't know that was even a possibility, because unlike if you are a drug addict or an alcohol abuser, these is rewarded, right? We're rewarded when we have a work addiction. We're
And
told how
normalized.
great it is.
It's normalized.
It's normalized. It's, in fact, it's celebrated, right? I mean, I
Celebrate.
got promotions, I got outside recognition, I got all of the fanfare around how great it was that I could do so much, right? That I could accomplish so much. And so it was within gosh, I think I saw her for 8 years, but it was in the first year that it was a very deep, intentional experience of understanding how to be in the present moment through
Yeah.
mindfulness techniques, and to start to realize what stories I was telling myself about what it meant to be successful versus what was actually the reality. So, for example, she told me, like, one of my things was I needed to respond to emails right away. I had to respond right away, or else I wasn't professional or reliable or dependable. And she said, well, how about we start with you replying within 2 hours of the email and see if people treat you differently if you wait 2 hours. And then we upped it to 24 hours and see if people treat you differently if 24 hours. And then she said, let's try 48 hours. And what I learned in those processes was all the things I told myself that I had to be doing because that's what made me successful were just stories. They didn't impact any of my relationships. It was just the fueling of the work addiction telling me I had to be doing.
Yeah. Wow. This is so powerful. I mean, even there's so much of data and research around this whole toxicity within work cultures of people sending emails really late at night, and this unspoken expectation of having to respond immediately. And what does that do to our sleep cycle? What does that do to our peace of mind? And quite frankly, these were things that on some level, when I lost my job in my last corporate stint that I ever looked back on in 2014, I didn't know who I was outside that role. That was my life. And when I lost that job, everything came crashing down. But it was such a powerful way for the universe to um, bring that opportunity to me into my life, so that I could wake up and realize that I am not my job, I'm not my work. But that was all that I knew. And let me tell you, I'm not very far from there with respect to loving my work, but it's such a different vibration and energy now. I mean, in terms of it's the whole inside out approach, giving my, creating space to step back, zoom out, and, honoring my body. And yeah, I catch myself, slipping into the mind so very often. But it's like you said, because of mindfulness, because, of the work that we do and things like that, it is a bit easier. I'm not fully there, but I can definitely say, if I were to look back on that person who was there in 2014 and the person I am now, bravo. I am very proud of the work that I have done. It's not easy because, to be honest, I have a massive ego, and I know that my work validates that ego. I know that. And there's a very fine line, a hidden energy in it, because you can be really proud of your work, feel fulfilled, but like you said, being addicted to it to an extent where, without it, you feel like nothing, you feel
Right.
unworthy, you feel like, who am I?
You have no
I've been,
identity.
I
Yeah.
have no identity. I had no boundaries. I didn't know any of that stuff. And yes, in a lot of ways, through the work that I do, because apart from uh, things that we use in therapy, I also use a lot of quantum techniques, and I
Mm.
understand that many of the things, the challenges that I have lived through, I have asked for in this lifetime, because I needed to get here. I needed to get to this point. And yes, I needed to go through all of that, fall, break, not know who I am, to get to a point to understand, my God, it's like you said, it's just stories in the head, and we just have to tell ourselves different stories. So I I would like you to talk more about why this is your story. And now, taking this context and the power of what you so courageously shared, and I know there's so much more, and your book talks about it as well, and we're going to get into that in a moment. Why is this work important right now in workplaces? Why do cultures need the work that you're talking about and doing?
Well, now is a particularly important time, as it's like you can't look anywhere without people talking about AI, right? Artificial intelligence, and all of these people who are going to be displaced from their work, and that jobs are going to become obsolete. And so for me, while that is a very scary thought for a lot of people, for me, it's actually very exciting, because it's this time in our history where we're going to have the opportunity to be more human, and that we
Love
can
that.
outsource the parts of us that don't require our full humanity to be invested in the process. And
Beautiful.
so very soon, and this is like, they projected this in 10 years from now, but now that people are saying this is actually going to be closer to 5, and then like 2 weeks later it's like it's actually going to be in 2 years, right? Because of just the exponential growth that's happening right now with artificial intelligence. It's a time where if you are not invested in the human experience, even if it's not your job, right? Like you and I, we work in the human experience as our offering in the world. But no matter what your organization is, humans likely play some role in the process of creating and distributing and whatever else is involved with your company. And so the more that people are choosing now to say, I'm going to understand more about what it means to fully engage my human experience at work, at home, and within, the more that we choose to do that, the more we're actually going to be so far ahead of the game.
Mhm.
Because if you sleep on this right now, you're just not going to exist for much longer, because everything is going to be taken over by non-human operators in this way. And so not only to, right, from, if you think about the economics of it, right, that a lot of people want to know what's the return on investment and that kind of a thing. The economics show that people who are investing in the human experience at work have increased retention, productivity, profit, all the things that people want to hear from a making sure that it is a good investment. But then when you come back to our hearts, right, of this, our human experience, for me, those are things that I say because it's a requirement for companies a lot of time to feel like it's a good thing to put their energy and time and money into. But at the end of the day, for me, Mary Beth Hyland, it's all about helping people to return to their own humanity, to know that our greatest gift is to understand what our values are and then be an expression, a full expression of that everywhere we go. And to
Yeah.
know that when we are in alignment with those values, that is when we are at our highest vibration, where we're manifesting all of the things that are here for us, because we've closed down and shut down all of the supposed to, shoulds, have to, expected tos. And we get this opportunity to step into what were we born to do? What do we get to do? What do we love to do? And that's within organizations or out on your own, right? And what does that look like? What does that feel like? What does that sound like? Because we are here to have a fully expressed experience as humans, and such a small percentage of us are choosing to do the work. What you just described earlier too, Caroline, of like, I'm going to be honest, I still am on my path with this and I still have a big ego. Me too. Me too, in such a big way, because this is not a come to a workshop and now it's all figured out. This
Yeah.
is not a come to one coaching session and all your problems are solved. This
Mhm.
is a journey to alignment that is a lifelong daily experience. Some days I feel like, yeah, I'm really doing it. I've really figured this out and everything feels in alignment. And then it could be 2 hours later from that feeling and just being in the total opposite end of that spectrum. But
Yeah.
because I've invested in understanding the human experience, I now know how to take care of myself and how to engage others to support. And I will say, conversations like this that we're having now and what you offer on your YouTube channel and on your social media platforms of just sharing, it's so critical, because the volume of just follow the rules and do what's asked of you is way higher than the
Yeah.
volume of what we're talking about right now. It is shifting. I'm feeling this shift. I know we talked about feeling this shift into the divine feminine when we talked a little while ago, but it's not happening right now in this moment. That's not the majority, right? It's
Yeah.
happening, but it is the kind of thing that we need to come together with more people who share these values and beliefs, and know we're
Yeah.
not alone and there's nothing wrong with you for wanting that. That is a very normal, and in fact it's a human right to have that experience in your lifetime.
Yeah, yeah, I love everything that you're saying. I know, wow, we could unpack so many things from what you just shared. Shame has been something that I've had to work with as a human element for a very long time. I could blame it on culture, family, childhood experiences, said and unsaid, met and unmet expectations, and this thick layer of shame, which now because of the work, I catch myself even in these moments while doing this work for myself, for my son, with my clients. I catch myself in that shadow right now as well. And everything that you describe is, to such a large extent, I used to think that I'm a rebel. um, but the kind of rebellion was not, it wasn't deep. It was an honorable rebellion or rebellious behavior. It was rebellion that was a function of pain, past pain,
Mm-hmm.
that came from not having a voice, not knowing that I have a voice, being shut down and not, being respected as a human being. And this shift through this work led me to realize that I actually had so much shame underneath that rebellion, that past person, that I had to work through in order to understand what you're talking about, whether it is understanding, our god-given gifts and talents, and how do we use that, whether it's in a, corporate setting, uh, starting a business, uh, in a relationship, love, intimate relationship, friendship, children, whatever it is, and working through those layers to understand that I don't need to conform. I still want to do the work of knowing who am I and honoring that to the degree that it's no more about rebellion. I don't need to walk away from anything. I need to stand in my truth. I need to be sovereign.
Hmm.
And, as we're talking, I can feel, pinpricks on my head because
Mhm.
I love these kind of conversations, and you said whether it's on YouTube, and I've chosen to start doing this on YouTube simply because I feel it is a much warmer container over here. And speaking of containers, I love what you said about seeking support because I think it's really, really important. I know isolation was another part of my shadow experience. And I had to work really hard to understand all of these things, these shadows, in order to come out and, say, I need help. I don't know it all. And, I'm not going to pretend I know it all and have this mask of arrogance when actually I'm afraid. Those are
Right.
frightened parts of me. And and I know, with, as we are building up into your book right now, I know that with a woman and a leader and a coach like you, there will be so many people who will need your work, will need my work too. But I'm saying that because we are on different geographies as well, primarily because I do believe there is a breaking down in the West, which is accelerating primarily because of what you said. The percent of people doing this work um, is very small, and so the slightest trigger, and I say slightest trigger because COVID and the virus it was a big thing, but from a cosmic perspective, it's a blip.
Yeah.
And that is the slightest trigger has disrupted us in the craziest way possible, as well as exposed our insecurities. It's exposed us for who we are and who we are not.
Yeah.
And I believe it's work like the work you're doing over there that is going to continue to grow to be relevant. I admire the fact that you're doing this, being able to integrate, you know, quantum, spiritual principles and take that like a warrior into workplaces. That is just wow. I just have to say this before we say anything else and give you space to respond.
Yeah, it's so funny you say that because I never tell people that's what I'm doing. And when I was doing primarily corporate work, right? It was kind of like how you hear about people who like put spinach inside the brownies so that their kids get the vitamins that they need. So
Oh,
it was
yeah.
like, you're going to get spirituality from me, whether or not you realize that. And what's been really rewarding now that I've pivoted more to really focusing on female coaches and consultants, women who are running their own businesses, is they're here for the spirituality, right? Like they're like, give me the spirit. I want that. I want more of that. I want more of what you're talking about. And I love to touch on something that you shared a moment ago about shame, right? You were talking about shame being such a big part of the unearthing process of your own healing journey. And one of the things that I often don't get to connect the dots to, which I'm excited that I get to do this now because I just know so many more people can relate, is that I wasn't just a work addict because it was like the thing I thought I was supposed to do in general because of society. It was because I was raised by a narcissistic father who told me literally over and over and over again that if I wasn't producing and if I wasn't successful and if I wasn't doing these things, then I was a loser and that I was a failure, and that, you know, he would reprimand me in very abusive ways if I didn't produce in the way that he wanted me to be producing, whether that was working with him on a project at home, or if that was my grades, or if that was me getting a job and how much money I was bringing in. Love was very conditional. Love was only given when I met the conditions. And when I didn't meet the conditions, I was physically, emotionally, and mentally abused. And so it created this inner dialogue of, if I don't do those things, then I'm not lovable, then I am not worthy, then I don't have any value, then I need to do more because it's not good enough. And it was the kind of thing that my dad was so strategic about his abuse that he told me if I told anybody that my parents would get a divorce and it would be my fault. So it was very controlled, right? He knew what he was doing. It was a very conditioned and controlled thing. And it wasn't until I was in college that I wound up saying it out loud, and that it became an awareness, right? That I was like, I can't do this anymore. This is what's been happening. This is what's going on, right? And things started to change, but it wasn't necessarily like for the better right away. You know, that took many, 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 many years. I never got treatment. I never helped myself. I was just like this warrior, I can take it on. I can do it. No big deal. It wasn't until that morning with my husband rolling over and telling me how nice it was to see me in bed that I was like, there's something else. This is bigger than just wanting to do good at work, right? There's so much more associated to this. And as I'm sure you know, the majority of our programming of how we operate happens up until the age of 7. And so my programming was so hardwired that production equaled love. Production equaled safety. You know, those were things that if I wasn't doing that, I felt unlovable and unsafe. And so that's not a story that just you have a good boss and all of a sudden that goes away, right? That's a deeply rooted, deeply ingrained. I mean, even to the point where still, as I mentioned, I'm still on this journey very much. Like just a few weeks ago, I'm a keynote speaker and I went to a training, a really incredible experience, a 9-month graduate level program. And the final thing was getting on stage and getting our videos made. And I got on stage and I was so proud of myself. I did so great. I was like, yeah, I really just did all the things. And then all it took was 2-3 hours until I was in a full self-hate spiral thinking, who do you think you are? Why did you do that? People are going to think you're this. And it was just hearing the voices of my past that were just so still deeply ingrained inside of me. But the difference between MaryBeth today versus MaryBeth a decade ago is that MaryBeth today can observe the voices, right? Can notice the voices, can feel the feelings, but not get stuck in them as them being the truth, but rather to say, isn't that interesting that I still have my dad's voice in my head about that? What can be my next choice now that I'm aware of that? Where in the past, it would have just been downward spiral, downward spiral, downward spiral. Now it's like the beginning of a downward spiral. Ooh, now I can watch it, I can see it, I can observe it. And now what's my next choice? And that's a human experience that we all deserve to have those skills. You know, we all are have a right to know how to have a relationship with what's going on in our minds so that we serve ourselves to pull ourselves up, be our own best friends instead of being our own worst enemies, because no one knows what's happening in here except for us.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's why this work is so rewarding for me now, particularly because I'm really focusing in with women who are like, hell yeah, I get that. I'm on that journey too. I want to do that work. I've already done a lot of that work and I know there's more to go. And so it's been incredible to now be in a position to be creating exponential impact from the sense of, if you're coaching a coach to do this work, they're then going to be, amplifying that out into the world and all the work that they're doing. And so
Yeah.
now getting to do that with women who are saying, I'm not going to hide this. I'm not going to hide the spiritual part. I'm not going to pretend like values aren't something to be honored with incredible ruthlessness of like, you cannot break this boundary of mine, right? Standing in your power, like you were talking about, like you don't need to run away. Like, why don't I just stand here and other people can move if they don't want to be a part of this,
Mhm.
right? That's fine. And so it's so beautiful to guide and then witness humans from all over the world waking up, making new choices, and saying, I have permission to be human, and I'm going to do that with integrity in my business, in my relationships, and in my life with myself. And how powerful that
I want to pause you there because I think this is a very powerful point to get into your book, Permission to Be Human. You're talking about that. It's dovetailing really, really powerfully into that. Um, I've taken a few screenshots from your book. So, this is where we're going. All the work that doesn't require emotional intelligence will be outsourced. And everyone who decided that emotional intelligence was just some hippy dippy thing will be left behind in a big way. I think we kind of touched upon some of those parts earlier on, back in the trail of this conversation. But I want to bring these things up before you open up because I want to know a bit. No, I will reveal that in a bit. Again, you say, as you know, workplace culture has a massive impact on the success of both the organization at large and the individuals who work there. There are healthy, thriving offices, and there are toxic, suffocating ones. You get to choose which environment you want to be a part of and intentionally craft around you. As you will read, there is a massive amount of data that points to how important this work is, especially amid the rise of artificial intelligence. Now is the time to decide what you and your company stand for. So powerful. So that you can create an environment that reflects your shared core values and the energy correlated with them. These stuck out for me. Actually, they touched me, they shook me because, from a large perspective, talks about what you just said and what I just read from your book, core values. I mean, everyone wants to get the business out the door, start selling, start shipping, start showing numbers, and be able to be externally, like you said, a winner, successful, but dying and crying and miserable and crying themselves to sleep. How did this energy, permission to be human, come about? What was it a turning point? Was it a tipping point? What was it for? What was
yeah.
it, how did you get there?
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the pandemic a little earlier, and it was in during the pandemic that I wrote this book, and it was an experience of recognizing that prior to the pandemic, a lot of organizations that I was working with, they wanted me to really stick with the nuts and bolts, right? They wanted me to stick with the check boxes that they could say, they've defined the values, they've put them on a poster, they've rolled them out in their strategic plan. But very few were like, how does this actually apply to us in the workplace now, right? Like, what does it actually mean to embody, to operationalize, to integrate this into the day to day? And it was the pandemic that led so many of those companies to come back to me and say, okay, that thing you were telling us to do, like, we need that now so bad because we have no idea how to take care of ourselves and our people in this time of incredible chaos in not knowing what's coming, right? We never know what's coming. It's a false sense
Yeah.
of security, right? But it was just, there was a much more of an opening for people to say, okay, I'll listen now. I wasn't really listening before. I was kind of going through the motions, and now we're going to listen. And in that process, I just kept helping people to understand that when it comes to the human experience, it's not a set it and forget it. It's not a one and done. It's not a, because we did this one thing, now we have it figured out. Just like with our own individual experience with our values, culture exists every single day, whether we do something about it or not. And so to choose to use your values as a compass and guardrails for the way we treat one another, for the way we go about doing our work, for the way that we hold ourselves and each other lovingly accountable, that is when it creates a transformational experience. Because it's one thing to say your company cares about transparency and then not actually share anything with one another about what's coming up or, you know, what's happening behind the scenes. And it's a whole different thing to actually have a company that values transparency and then is constantly open and willing to answer questions and has forums and ways in which people can have those conversations. So it's not a, you know, the one person who's brave enough to speak up. It's just a part of the norms and the experience. And so it's incredibly rewarding for people to go from an experience to feeling like values are this pie in the sky, nice idea, to actually pinning them down into tactical, tangible, operationalized way of being. One of the things that I help people to remember all the time is that our vision is our why, you know, why you do the work that you do. Your mission is your what you actually do every day. And your values are your how you go about accomplishing that work.
Love
So
that.
values are the way in which you engage with everything, right? Right
Yeah.
now, values are in action.
Yeah. Your lifeline. It's your breath. It's you know, it's the way you sustain everything. Not just that, the way you start something and the way you sustain it.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And too many of us, myself included in my journey to alignment, we took on values of other people, like I was describing with my dad, right? Of like, okay, I need to care about these things because these are the things I was told matters. And then you
Yeah.
get to a certain point in your life and you've accomplished all of those things on your list and you're like, wait a minute, why am I so miserable? Right? Like you just described, like you could be thinking you're doing the best thing, but then crying yourself to sleep every night. Like that, there's a disconnect, right? There's something
Yeah.
that's not lined up. And so
Yeah.
it's our responsibility to illuminate the values that were instilled in us for better or worse, and the ones that are truly ours versus the ones that we were conditioned to believe are ours.
I love that. I love that. Conscious creation. After all, we are creators. We are, you know, as in the microcosm, so in the macrocosm. We are a reflection of source. So I love everything that you're, you know, bringing into this space. Before we move on to the final piece, how do people get a hold of this beautiful book of yours?
Yeah, well, it's available in all the major retailers, but you know the simplest, if you want to go online to Amazon, you can check it out there. On our website, we have a list of all the places that people could go if they don't want to go to Amazon, which I totally respect that too. And so our website is sparkvisionnow.com.
We can probably, you know, share that on, you know, the LinkedIn post and things like that, so people can go to it after they've watched this. I will be sharing a clip of this beautiful deep conversation. It's so spiritual, you know, it's in my body right now. I am in my body through this conversation. You touched upon the coaching that you're doing with female entrepreneurs, female
Yes.
coaches.
Yeah. Yep.
Tell us more about that.
Yeah, this is actually my personal journey to alignment too, and I think I shared this with you before, in that last year was very much like a dark night of the soul for me.
Mm.
The whole year, right? The whole year was me having these big aspirations, these big goals, achieving them, but being miserable in the process of achieving them, and thinking they were going to be the thing that got me to feeling like I'm finally where I want to be. And isn't that an interesting story that so many of us experience, right? Like, well, once I do this, then I'll be happy, right?
Then I'll be.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So I was doing a lot of that last year, and it got to a place where I just was feeling like a crazy person because I was doing all of these scattered things. I had a retreat in Greece, and I was doing keynotes, and I was doing group coaching, and I was doing one-on-one coaching, and I was doing culture consulting, and I was doing workshops. And so it was just, I was willing and available to anybody who had a budget, who wanted to hire me to do work that I had an ability to do. I was not a good advocate for my own values, right? I was very much in the, well, I really would love to make as much money as possible.
And what feels to me, and trust me, in so many respects, about chasing the money, and we there could be a whole other episode around money consciousness, but feeling the aspects around this desperation, this lack, scarcity, limitation, not enoughness, working within like borrowed time. I've gone through that. I still do slip every now and then, and then being able to see, where I am allowing my energy to leak. This leaky energy is something which I've had to and continue to, um, you know work with respect to, like you said, values, watching the shadow, um, using the power of observation, yielding yielding to the next level, and letting go of that fear, the program in the mind, all these different things which are a part of a collective matrix, um, that so many of us are living, and so many of us who are not in the space of even realizing that there's something wrong because they're still plugged in. So I'm so glad that you're talking about this, and I'm so glad, because I truly believe, and I don't know who I was talking to yesterday or day before about, this era, and we may have also spoken about this as well. We are stepping into this era where there is a rise of the feminine divinity and the feminine power that is obvious everywhere we see, and which is why there is also a rise of so many more women wanting to reclaim their voice, wanting to do things their way, needing the support, the guidance, and the tools. So I'm so glad, because most of my clients happen to be women as well. So I'm so glad to hear, you know, because I'm also understanding that you are honoring your own energy and your own mission through that. And that is so powerful, isn't it? Because in some ways, what we're doing is really selfish because we get a kick out of it. It's so fulfilling. But to watch other women rise and find their voice and, go do spectacular things in their lives. Oh my God. Right now I can feel it in my chest as I say these things. So tell us more about, uh, is the program still open? Can women
Yeah.
register? Give us more
Yeah.
details.
Yeah, so the what came out of that experience of a year of learning what it wasn't, and just getting really still and really quiet, and clear on, well, what is it, right? Is I took all of these seemingly random things and I braided them into one offering,
Wow.
one offering. So it's
Wow.
no longer a random retreat or a random workshop. It's all a part of this one program, which is called the Mastery Program on our journey to alignment. And we have 5 spots still open, and it is a 12-month experience for established female coaches and consultants, meaning this isn't your first rodeo. You didn't just start coaching last week. You didn't just start consulting even in the last year. You've been doing this work long enough to have had the dark night of the soul.
Yeah.
You have gotten to a place where you woke up and said, oh my gosh, I started my business so that I could be more in alignment with my values and to feel more freedom and purpose and have more revenue. But here I am doing all the things I did in my corporate world because that's what I knew. And I just continued them over. And I'm waking up to realizing there's something more here. There's something more here. And so it's really quite powerful for me because that's what I was going through last year, birthed this new program, and it has completely put me and my energy and my voice into a space where these are women who are soaking up every single word and every single opportunity, not only from me, but from each other, because this is a group of wise women, right, who are really doing the work and are ready to embody the change, not just try it on and see if it's a good fit, but keep trying all the time, constantly, every day, doing a little bit here, maybe taking a big stride there. But over the course of 12 months together, we do this work in their personal lives. So understanding where they're in and out of alignment with their values within themselves. And then we move into their business. So what does that look like for their business? And then ultimately their impact in the world.
Love
And we
that.
also have, you mentioned my quest to become a cowgirl. I finally found a way to weave in my cowgirl, my horses. We have a retreat that happens in person at
Wow.
MaryBeth Resort in Tucson, Arizona, which is Oprah's favorite retreat center. And the head of their equine program has developed an entire experience based on my book. So
Wow.
these women are going to get to have a long journey together online and then come together in person and not only be mirrored for each other, but to use the gifts of horses and what horses have to offer to reflect back. Are we truly in alignment? Are we saying what we want? Are we able to set these boundaries clearly? And what feedback does that give us for how we then step into this work even further? So it's very, very, very exciting time.
Wow. And so powerful. I mean, wow. I'm just taking it all in, visualizing what that's gonna look and feel like. So much power. You embody it. It's not just language, but you really feel it from your heart. You're doing the work. I am so proud of you, and I am so honored to know you and to be in alignment with this kind of work with you. Uh, I'm so glad that our paths crossed, and the work that you're doing is spectacular. I am definitely going to have a clip up on LinkedIn for people to watch and then come back here in to share. Um, for anyone watching in who may not be here yet, what would be something you would like to leave for them to think about and feel into?
Yeah, I love that question. We've talked about this, but I haven't said it directly yet. But it's this idea of following your energy. So when your energy is filled up, when you feel energized, it's because your values are present. And when
Mm,
you're feeling your energy getting drained, sucked out of you, it's because your values are being violated.
yeah. You're
So
not in
it
alignment with yourself.
exactly. And so we oftentimes will say, I really didn't like that. And so the next question is, why? Right?
Hmm.
Like, what was it about that experience that drained you? And then you can start to get more information about which of your values weren't present there, right? And then same for when you feel like that was the best thing ever. What made it the best thing ever? What aspects of it felt the best to you? Okay, now I can identify my values that were present and do more of that on purpose. And
Yeah,
so it's a beautiful exercise. If you just keep a little notepad on you and you do that for a week, or even if you do it for a day, that's more than most people ever do. It's a
yeah.
huge gift. And you can start to say, oh, wow, these are the kinds of things that fill me up. And these are the kinds of things that take my energy away. And if you want to correlate those to the words that are your values, but maybe you don't know the words yet, we have a free core values quiz that you can take 24/7 and it'll email you the results right away. And it's just corevaluesquiz.com. So it's a great way to get started.
Let me try and see if I can put that here. Core values. Say again, please. Core values.
Corevaluesquiz.com. QUIZ.
.com. Okay, let me try to add it.
Yeah, there you go. Beautiful.
Awesome. Awesome. So powerful. Oh, my dear. I am still, it's all reverberating within me, and I know beyond this, it's gonna take me forward. So, I love what you're doing, and I'm so glad that we are in connection. I know I've already said that a few minutes back. Thank you for making the time to open your heart and show me that little girl who has gone through everything that she went through. I just saw your wide eyes open with the last question, and I was able to peek into you and really feel, your innocence. And it's spectacular. So I want to thank you for saying yes to being my first guest on A Life of Greatness, because this is what it is. It's a whole bunch of things coming out, and it's beautiful and it's rewarding, and showing up and honoring and holding and caressing and caring and loving for all parts of ourselves is really the juice of this experience. So thank you for sharing everything, your book, your life, your work with organizations, and this beautiful 12-month program which culminates into a very powerful in person retreat. I wish you the very best in everything that you set your heart intention to, for others to feel into, to ignite their own spark, and realize and remember that they can give themselves the permission to be human and feel human. And yeah, I wish you the very best.
Thank you so much, Caroline. Such a gift. My heart feels it too. I appreciate you.
Love you so much.
You
Thank you
too.
so much for being here. And I want to thank our viewers who will be watching in, um, for watching this beautiful conversation with our guest, Mary Beth Hyland. We look forward to seeing you very, very soon. Bye.